Right, hello, good morning. I hope you're all well and have been able to enjoy this beautiful weather. It has been lovely out there. I've gone with another pre-recorded just because it seemed to work quite well. So again, I'll be live on Facebook in terms of I'll be replying to comments when this is premiering. So if you have any questions, pop them in and I will get back to you. Okay, right, today we're going to talk about cravings and emotional eating. This is one of my favourite topics and one that's really important. Not that I'm saying what I've spoken about so far hasn't been important, but often things in nutrition, the actual nutrition itself is fairly simple and it's fairly easy. But it's us humans, we're complicated beings. I know I mentioned last week that it's often really individualized to the person. And that's, yeah, it kind of goes for everything. So nutrition is simple, but we as human beings are complicated. And so we have things like cravings and emotional eating that makes things a little bit more complicated. So I find these really interesting to talk about. You can Google a lot of information on how much of something you should eat and all that jazz, all the science behind the nutrition and what we should be eating. But putting that into practice is a different ball of fish. Ball of fish? Bowl of fish? Kettle of fish? No. You know what I mean? It's different ball game. Different ball game. There we go. We got there eventually. Okay, so what are we going to talk about today? We're going to cover cravings, what they are, why we crave certain foods, how to limit them, what to do with cravings. Then we're going to talk about emotional eating, similar thing. So why do we emotional eat? Emotional hunger versus physical hunger, and how to deal with our emotional eating. And then I'm going to give you a little roundup, a little overview at the end. Okay, so let me move this little thingy. Okay, so what are cravings? So craving is a specific motivational state to eat a particular food. Being a particular food, that's something key that we'll talk about in a minute. But just remember, it's a particular food. So one specific item, you may have something that you often crave, and it will often be this one specific thing. Okay, so moving on to food reinforcement. So any kind of reinforcement increases the likelihood that you perform the same action again. And in this case, we'll talk about food reinforcement. So we're talking about eating the same food again when you're in the same situation in the future. Okay, so food receptors. In our mouth, let me just move that back up there. In our mouth, in our GI tract, we have receptors throughout that detect these six different nutrients that then sends a signal to our brain. So these are sugar, starch, salt, protein, fat, and glutamate. Glutamate is the kind of meaty taste you get in bone broth, fish sauce, soy sauce, and in its most concentrated form is monosodium glutamate, which is commonly known as MSG, which I'm sure we all would have heard of, which I think is now banned. I know it used to be in Pringles, and it basically made them really addictive and people want to go back for more. But I think that it's no longer in it. Although I'm pretty sure Pringles are still pretty addictive, and they're still hard to stop eating. But hopefully just, not as much as they used to be because there's no MSG in them. And one other thing, so cravings are transient, which means they will pass. Again, we'll talk about this a little bit more in a minute. Okay, this bar of dairy milk. Interestingly, chocolate is the most craved food. I read a study the other day, and it says it's the most craved food for both men and women. Women tend to crave it more. I think it was something like 39% of women, it is their most craved food. So if you're someone who craves chocolate, do not worry, you are not alone. And we will come on to why this might be in a minute. Okay, so these receptors send a signal to our brain and it triggers the dopamine response. So we release dopamine. It's known as the happy hormone, the feel-good hormone, pleasure hormone. It's the thing that makes us feel good when we eat food. So dopamine is released. This stimulates the motivation to continue eating because it's a pleasurable experience and we want to continue doing it. Then our brain remembers all the sensory cues that we kind of experience as we eat it, and it learns from these. So this could be the look of it, where we are at that certain time, the smell, all of the cues around it, anything kind of sensory related to eating it, it remembers them. And these cues then become triggers. So which could be why you smell a certain thing I don't know, even if it's like a happy memory and you smell a certain smell and it takes you back to your childhood, when you are, like on the beach eating ice cream with your family, your brain has associated that smell of whatever it is with eating something, and it all becomes a trigger basically. Same goes for like food advertising. If you see a nice image of food on the screen, it will likely trigger a response that you may have eaten that food or something similar before, and it's all linked, and that's kind of what gets us craving foods. So the amount of dopamine release is related to the concentration of these nutrients. So the higher the concentration, the more dopamine is released and the more motivated we are to want these foods. And this is why we often crave ultra processed foods, because these kind of 6 nutrients I just touched on are often in such high concentrations in ultra processed foods that we naturally want to eat them more, because it drives more dopamine, basically. It makes us feel good. So that's why we crave ultra processed foods. Okay, right, there is such thing as a bliss point, or just right. So if you think about the analogy of Goldilocks and the 3 bears, she has her porridge. Let me move this down. Over there. She has her porridge. She tries one which is too salty, one that's too sweet, and one that's just right. Same goes for saltiness. If you have some food that doesn't have any salt in it, it might taste a little bit bland. You add a little bit, tastes pretty good, add a little bit more, and you've accidentally ruined your dish and it no longer tastes good. So we have, there is no like optimal amount of salt. It's not 100% of any of those nutrients. The right amount isn't 100%, which means there's room for other nutrients. So yeah, if the bliss point is, I don't know, 30%, it means you've then got 70% left, and 70% to find more bliss points, basically. So there's room for other nutrients, which means we can find a combination that hits multiple bliss points, and that's going to maximize our dopamine release, which is often, again, why ultra processed foods are so highly craved, because it's not just one, it's not just like sugar that's in there, it's sugar, fat, maybe some salt, all the things that are, triggers the dopamine response. So chocolate. So we mentioned that it's the most craved food. This is likely because it's got a high concentration of carbs and fat. So again, we're hitting 2 bliss points here, maximizing our dopamine response. It also contains a naturally occurring chemical, which is kind of linked to habit forming, which also could be why we crave it routinely. Okay, how to limit cravings. So we mentioned that cravings are triggered by sensory cues that we previously associated with dopamine releasing foods. So I mentioned food adverts. I'm sure if you look at this image of the melt in the middle pudding, I'm sure you'll all know where it's from. It is, of course, the M&S adverts. I remember when this first came out, it was amazing. And I think we can all now recognise M&S adverts from anything else. They all stand out. Yeah, that pudding looked amazing. It definitely triggered an emotional response for me. And it makes people want to eat. And basically, they have absolutely nailed their marketing, because it makes us crave those things. Okay, so something we can do to limit these food cues. I mean, I could say don't watch TV and don't watch the M&S adverts, but that's probably a little bit unrealistic. But things like moving food from out of sight. Again, I read another study the other day, and I think it was saying that it was based in America, and it was talking about how those who have carbs just out on their counter in the kitchen weigh, I think it was something like 20 pounds more than those who don't. And it's different because I think Americans, their most eaten food is carbohydrates. I think it's like grain-based carbs. But it's also talking about like combination of sweet stuff. So we're talking brownies, cookies, that kind of stuff. Bread's on there as well. So I think they generally do eat more carbohydrates than us as a nation. That is definitely not certain, but from kind of what I've noted and remembered, they do. So, and I'm not saying if you have bread on your counter, you're going to weigh more than your neighbour who doesn't. But it is something to think about. So just moving food from outside. It could be like, just making sure you don't leave bread out on the side if you made a cake. Maybe just putting it in a tin, putting it in a cupboard. Just making it so that you don't have the visual cue just there. I've also said don't walk past the bakery every day. If it means you smell that fresh bread in the morning, it smells amazing, and you go in and you end up buying a loaf of bread, 5 donuts, whatever. Obviously that's kind of an extreme example. But yeah, if it does, then maybe just walk a different way. Again, it's a bit of an extreme one, but the principles apply, just limiting those food cues. So maybe just thinking about what those cues are for you. Is it a certain smell? Is it seeing something that always makes you do it? Or is it a certain activity? Like often, if you're watching a game of football on TV or watching a rugby match down at your pub or your local rugby club, often you'll get there and then you'll just go straight to the bar and order a pint. So yeah, that's a way, just limiting those food cues. Almost breaking a habit, basically. Another way is to create effort barriers. So I had a client who absolutely loves toast. They're a weight loss client, love toast, that's not a problem. And she was eating, it was probably around 4 slices of toast a day, which again, you can still eat 4 slices of toast a day and still lose weight, absolutely. But it just meant that she was lacking in nutrients elsewhere, and she wasn't necessarily accounting for those 4 slices of toast. She wasn't maybe eating slightly less later. It was just there because every time she saw the toaster, she wanted to make toast, whereas she then put it in a cupboard and she reduced her toast intake massively, just because one, it was the food cue was out of sight, she didn't see the toaster, but also it was now more effort. Like you couldn't just pop your toast in the toaster, you had to go and get in the cupboard, get the toaster out, plug it in, and it just made it a bit more effort. Same goes, you can put some food on top of your fridge if it means you have to get a step. Anything that's just going to add a little bit more effort. I've mentioned this before, but so I've been doing a lot of baking during lockdown, which has been great. I've loved it. It's been really good. I used to do it so much as I was growing up, so it's really nice for me to get back into it. But there was one day where I went into the kitchen to make a cup of tea and I left having made like a ridiculous amount, and I made so many different batches of brownies, and I love cooking, so I really like recipe development. And I think I ended up trying to develop a batch of Nutella brownies. I think I ended up making about 7 batches, not full batches, but I was doing a lot basically. And so just by moving my electric whisk into the lounge, it made it, there was a slight more effort for me to then start my baking. So just small things like that. Buying nuts and shells, so rather than buying like deshelled pistachios or any kind of nut that's normally in a shell, it's now just a little bit more effort, and it might stop you from potentially overeating or at all. It's just a bit more effort. A last one to limit cravings. Don't restrict yourself. So a lot of people go through this cycle of massively restricting themselves, and then they have this massive craving for something. They'll indulge in that craving, but it will likely mean they overeat. Whereas if we have like small amounts of something, or not even small, if you allow yourself to have chocolate every day, if it's chocolate you crave most and chocolate you find at the weekend you just absolutely can't really deal and you end up eating the whole bar. If you have a smaller bar or some kind of chocolate or anything every day, we're then going to value that food that we crave so much less, and it just becomes another thing that we eat every day. Like you're going to eat your vegetables, some protein every day. Just chocolate just becomes part of that. It's just something else that you eat every day, and it's likely to make you crave that food a lot less, which is, yeah, huge. Okay, so we haven't managed to limit those foods, and we haven't managed to limit our cravings. We've now suddenly got a craving. What do we do? Okay, so the first one, I'm going to go into these in a minute. Surf the urge, have some self-efficacy, and then just indulge that crave and enjoy it. And just enjoy it as much as this golden retriever is enjoying that it's ice cream. I literally love that picture so much. Okay, so surfing the urge. What do I mean by this? So, okay, first thing I want you to do is to pause. You've got this craving. Before you just let that impulse take over and you go and have that food, just pause a minute. Think to yourself, am I actually hungry? Am I craving a specific food? If it's a specific food, it's likely to be a craving. It's not likely to be physical hunger. And ask yourself, would I eat vegetables right now? Again, if the answer is no, you're probably not actually hungry. It's probably just a craving. So what to do now? Distract yourself for 30 minutes. Go and do something, I don't know, go and call a friend, go and paint your nails. Painting your nails is actually a good one, because one, you have to paint your nails and then you have to let them dry. So you can't really touch anything or eat anything while your nails are drying. But essentially, you're just going to ride out that craving wave. We're going to surf the urge. 30 minutes is up, you can come back to it. Has the craving passed? As I said, cravings are transient, so if it's a craving, it likely will have passed. But you are now in an informed place to make a decision. If the craving is still there, you can now make a decision whether to try and ignore it again or whether to indulge that urge. We're now in a better place to make that decision. Next, okay, self-efficacy. So autonomy is so important when we're looking at food. So having that decision to either eat the food or not eat it kind of goes back to restriction. If you don't buy those things, and I know if there's something that you crave all the time and it could be easier to not buy that food, but then when you are exposed to those foods, you're more likely to overeat it, as I kind of mentioned. But also if you're craving it, it's probably because you enjoy it. So it doesn't really make sense to try and cut out those foods that we really enjoy, because that's just going to not make us happy. Like, life is for living, food is for, yes, nourishing ourselves, but also enjoyment is a huge factor. So having those foods and having your autonomy, having that decision yourself to decide, am I going to eat this food or am I going to not today? Okay, right, this picture is my drawer of dreams. For those of you who follow me on Instagram, I often update what's in my drawer of dreams, what new finds I found, and what my drawer of dreams is looking like. And without failure, I will always get a handful of people saying, I don't know how you can live in the house with this massive drawer full of delicious treats. And they say, oh yeah, I'd just eat the whole thing. I'd sit there and eat the whole thing. And I'm not saying that I haven't overeaten from this drawer. Most of the time I don't, but there are times where I have, and it kind of works the other way around. Just because you think you will always overeat doesn't mean you won't. So, but if you stop, as long as you say to yourself, I'm going to eat this whole drawer, I'm going to eat this whole bag of crisps, I'm going to eat this whole bar of chocolate, that is likely what you're going to do. So stop telling yourself that you're going to eat this whole thing. Have the self-efficacy and the self-belief to think that I'm not going to indulge this craving, I'm not going to eat this whole bar. As soon as you start thinking that, you're not going to do it. You're not going to do it. And say one day if we're going to my drawer, say you only eat one thing from the drawer, and then the next day you eat multiple things and you do overeat. That's still a win. You've still done it once. And now you know you've done it once. You know that you can resist that urge to resist that craving or resist the urge to eat the whole bag, the whole packet, the whole drawer. So stop telling yourself you're going to eat the whole drawer, and you're more likely to. Finally, enjoy it. So we have surfed the urge. We have now made the informed decision to eat this. So I want you to take a moment to enjoy it. Go and sit down with it in a quiet spot to make sure there's no distractions. I'm sure you've all been there when you're watching some TV and you've got some minstrels next to you. And you suddenly finish, you look in your bag and they've all gone, just because you've been paying attention to what's on your screen, you've not been paying attention to what you're eating. So take a minute just to really enjoy them, enjoy that moment, eat it slowly, savor it, enjoy it. Once that's done, move on. Like, all you've done, you've just eaten some chocolate, it was delicious. Just note to yourself how tasty it was, how much you enjoyed it, and move on. Don't feel guilty about indulging in that craving. Again, once you have the autonomy, you are in charge of your nutrition. I say in charge, not in control, because I think we always have to be really careful with the words we use around food and the language we use. In control, you can be in control, you can not be in control. And what happens if you go from being in control to suddenly not in control? Do you start to feel guilty? Do you start to kind of eat things a little bit more? But when we're in charge, we have autonomy. And as I said, autonomy is so important when it comes to food. So yeah, being in charge. I could probably talk about food, relationship with food and food language. I could potentially do another talk on that. If anyone would like to hear that, let me know. But yeah, ultimately just enjoy that food as much as this golden retriever is. Look how happy he is. So chuffed. I hope you all enjoy ice cream as much as this little guy does, because he is loving life right now. Okay. Right, so we've kind of looked at the outside cues of cravings and why we crave them. Now we're going to look at more like the intrinsic stuff, what physiologically, psychologically, more psychologically makes us crave stuff. So, okay, let me put this in here. So what is emotional eating? It is the tendency to eat in response to a set of effective cues. Firstly, just as cravings are normal, emotional eating is normal. Next. Okay, right, this is a picture of me at my, what is that, 7th birthday, 6th birthday? 6th or 7th birthday. I was at Roller City, the absolute birthday of dreams for a 7-year-old. I think we should just take a moment to note my outfit. Amazing. Those fake leather purple trousers and a matching purple top. I was living my best life. But back to blow up my birthday cake. So birthday is obviously a celebration, and a birthday cake is something that we all have. We've had them ever since we were little, and that's a way of, that is an emotion. We're celebrating a birthday. And there's, we often see, well, birthdays are really exciting, and it's a nice, happy emotion. And one of the responses is we celebrate and we have birthday cake. What else? We've got Christmas. We always have a nice Christmas dinner. Weddings, wedding cake is a big thing. Easter, we have chocolate. So these are all kind of celebratory things. These are all emotions. It's a form of emotional eating. And then the other one we have is potentially perceived not quite in the same light. It could be you've had a bad day at work. You get home and you demolish a tub of Ben & Jerry's cookie dough. Can I just say, cookie dough is definitely the best flavour. If you disagree, go and let me know in the comments. I'm happy to battle it out over what the best Ben & Jerry's flavour is. So you've eaten this ice cream, and it's not a problem unless it becomes your only coping mechanism, or if it makes you feel worse than it did before you started eating that. So you've had a rubbish day. If you eat it, it makes you feel worse, maybe you feel guilty or something like that, this is potentially when it becomes a problem. And obviously, if we're doing this on a regular basis, it can lead to a binge eating disorder, or it can just have some negative health outcomes. But as a kind of one-off, it is a coping mechanism, and it often does make people feel better. So why do we eat as an emotional response? So the first thing is more kind of a biological response. So it increases cortisol. So cortisol, so when we're kind of stressed, cortisol is increased. Cortisol is the stress hormone. This means our appetite is enhanced, and it makes us crave those sugary and fatty foods. And then more, it's like an emotional kind of psychological response is we use it as a coping mechanism. So we get this immediate sense of pleasure as we eat those tasty, nice foods. But it often will only kind of give us gratification in that certain moment. It won't last very long. So we use it to suppress the emotion, and sometimes this can lead to overeating. So for some, or it could be even you on different days, one day, one bar of chocolate may be enough. And that's absolutely fine. Like, cool, it's made you feel a little bit better. That's great. And you now feel fine, you feel happier. But in other situations or for other people, it may make you overeat. And the tendency to overeat will kind of depend on a dieting status. So again, I said, if you're massively restricting, you're probably more likely to overeat. It can be dependent on body image perceptions. These are all evidence-based reasons. So people who have lower body image or perceive their body image kind of in not particularly high, they don't value their body image highly, or they don't value themselves high, they are more likely to overeat. Also, it could be down to personality traits and genetics as well. So those are all just some reasons as to why we eat as an emotional response. So looking at emotional hunger versus physical hunger. So emotional hunger is going to hit you fast, whereas physical hunger, we generally start to feel hungry throughout the day. It may be that you feel a little bit peckish, and then you start to feel actually hungry. That hunger builds up. Emotional hunger is just going to hit you fast. And as I mentioned, cravings are specific foods. So emotional hunger is likely to draw you to a specific food. Whereas if we're hungry, physically hungry, our tummy is rumbling, as a good way of kind of trying to detect, is it emotional or physical? Are the physical cues there? Is your tummy rumbling? When did you last eat? We're going to be drawn, we're just going to feel hungry. We're not going to be drawn to specific foods. There may be foods that we kind of fancy, but we're not going to be like, I must eat this one, whatever it is, this bag of crisps right now. With emotional hunger, it's difficult to be satisfied. So with physical hunger, you'll start to feel full, you'll start to feel satiated, and you'll feel satisfied. Whereas emotional hunger, you'll likely be eating, you'll keep eating, and that just won't go away, you just won't feel satisfied. A good thing to note though, we do also have hedonic hunger. So this is why it's important for I don't know, if you're someone who's trying to lose weight, and if you're just eating loads of different diet foods, it may be all smaller portions. It may be that you are physically full, but if you're potentially having the diet version of like the normal version, it may be that you're just not as satisfied. That is not going to satisfy you, and it means you're eating more later on. Whereas if you just ate that food in the first place, it may mean that you're not going to eat as much as you would if you had that diet food, but then you're kind of trying to make up for the fact that you're not actually satisfied. So hedonic hunger is a thing, and that involves, so the taste, if it's not as tasty, if it doesn't look as good. So I mean, I'm not saying you have to make every single thing like Instagrammable, looking amazing, but the way stuff looks, yeah, does affect our hedonic hunger. Emotional hunger can also lead to mindless eating. So as I mentioned, we often use it to suppress emotions. If we're just trying to avoid those emotions and do everything we can to not think about those emotions, we're likely to be watching TV or watching a movie, doing something where we're not actually paying attention to what we're doing, what we're eating. So it means we're more likely to mindlessly eat and overeat. So how to stop emotional eating? The first thing to do is to identify the common trigger emotions. So not all emotions will evoke this overeating, so it's just important to work out which ones do. It's likely that it's going to be stress, anxiety, boredom. So something good to do is get a little journal and just for maybe a week or two, write down the emotions you're experiencing, when you're experiencing them, why, what is behind that emotion, what's kind of happened to trigger it, and did it cause you to overeat? That way you'll hopefully get a good picture of what those common trigger foods are, trigger emotions are even. Okay, so say we're feeling stressed or we're feeling anxious or anything, have a toolbox full of things you can do to kind of help you deal with that emotion. So it could be call a friend, it could be watch an episode of your favourite TV show. Mine at the moment, I'm watching Modern Family, thoroughly enjoying it. What else have I watched recently? Oh, This Is Us on Amazon Prime, thoroughly enjoying that too. It could be taking a bath, going for a walk, or doing any kind of exercise, and it could be stroking your dog or cat. That has been shown to release endorphins and makes us feel happy. I mean, just looking at that picture of the golden retriever, that clearly made me very happy. Yeah, I'm sure some of you know that I do absolutely love dogs. So for me, stroking a dog is going to make me feel really good. So another thing we can do is to meditate or do some any kind of mindful practice. So it will help you pay attention to that present moment. In that moment when you're focusing on this, nothing around you is important. Your one task is just to be present in that moment, which can really help you relieve that stress and help you cope with it. That's actually, I've started doing like mindfulness and meditation is something that I never would have thought I'd do. It was never something, I never thought it was going to be right for me. But probably in the last month, I've started to do, there was a challenge with a chance to win something, classic. So I wanted to win this thing. It's, I don't know if anyone's heard of it, it's a Muse headband. So it kind of tracks meditation. And meditation, I kind of wanted to get into it, but I was like, is it for me? But then there was this chance to win this really cool device which helps you meditate and it tracks your meditation. And I like being able to, I love data, so I like being able to track stuff. And you have to do this 7 days of mindfulness, gratitude, meditation type thing. And I started it and I just really, really enjoyed it. It felt so nice to just be in that present moment. Nothing else mattered. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. So even if you think it might not be for you, I just recommend giving it a go for sure. So other ways, so we can prevent the onset of these emotions. So it could be that you may need to make some lifestyle changes. So what is it that's making you feel stressed? Why is it making you feel stressed? What can you do to stop that stress? So these are also evidence-based stuff. So physical activity, exercise has been obviously known, we all know this, it helps our mental state massively. So that's something that you can do. Sleep quality and quantity, again, has a huge effect on our emotions. Spending time with loved ones and potentially limiting alcohol consumption, just because it's been known to kind of create like anxiety and things like that. And I'm sure it will affect more than others, but yeah, alcohol anxiety is definitely a thing. And the last thing is to accept your feelings. Ultimately, the best way to kind of deal with the emotions is to accept them, to lean into these emotions. What are they? And I know this can be scary to start with. particularly negative emotions, they're not pleasant and we don't want to deal with them. But ultimately, if we sit down, we accept them, it means we can work through them, embrace them, and hopefully that it's going to make us feel better. Right, that's it. We've got through. So final thoughts, a little roundup. Cravings are normal. There are a few things we can do to minimize them. Don't restrict yourself, because it's likely to mean we're going to crave stuff more. Look at your food environment. There could be cues there which are making us crave foods more. If we just look at that environment and change a few things up. Emotional eating is also normal. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but it can lead to binge eating disorders if not addressed. I just want to point out, so overeating, we often do it. Sometimes binge eating, if it's not done like all the time, if it's not particularly common, again, it's okay. But binge eating disorder is a real thing. And if you think that you are experiencing some kind of binge eating disorder, go and see your GP or go and see a registered dietitian, and they can help you out. Accept and lean into these emotions. What are they? Why are we feeling like this? It's going to help us deal with them, and find other ways to help you cope. Okay, that is it. I will stay on till about 12 o'clock. So let me know if you have any questions and I'll try and answer them. I hope you've enjoyed that. Yeah, see you. Enjoy this lovely weather.